There are billions of animals alive on this planet right now, raised, hunted, and eaten for one simple purpose: food. Cows grazing across fields, chickens packed into farms, fish pulled out of oceans by the millions, goats, pigs, sheep, entire global systems designed around animals that spend their lives turning plants into something humans can consume. Grass becomes muscle, grain becomes fat, sunlight becomes calories. Now, pause for a second and think about something slightly different. When was the last time you saw lion on a menu? Or wolf? Or tiger? Or eagle? Not as a rare headline or a survival story. Not as something shocking or illegal. Just normal. Something you could order without thinking twice. You probably haven't. And that's not a coincidence. Because across thousands of years of human history, across continents that had no contact with each other, no shared language, no shared culture, people kept arriving at the exact same invisible rule: eat the plant eaters, avoid the meat eaters. And if you really think about that, it's strange. A deer and a wolf are both made of the same basic things: muscle, fat, protein. From a purely physical standpoint, both are edible. Both could, in theory, end up on a plate. So why does one become the foundation of entire food industries, while the other is almost completely ignored? The answer isn't simple. It's not just taste. It's not just tradition. It's not just safety. It's multiple layers stacking on top of each other, all pointing in the same direction. And the first layer is something you can't see, but it controls everything: energy. Every ecosystem on Earth runs on energy flowing upward. Plants capture sunlight and store it. Herbivores eat those plants and convert that energy into their own bodies. Predators eat the herbivores. But at every step, most of that energy disappears, lost as heat, burned through movement, used to keep the body alive. Only a small fraction makes it to the next level. So imagine it like this. A field full of plants holds a huge amount of energy. A herd of animals eating those plants holds much less. And a predator feeding on that herd holds even less than that. By the time you reach the top of the food chain, you're dealing with the smallest slice of the entire system. Now think about what it would take to turn that into food. If you wanted to farm predators, you wouldn't just be raising them. You'd have to raise everything beneath them too. Animals to feed them, and animals to feed those animals, over and over again. It's a system that multiplies cost at every level. To produce one predator, you'd need to produce many prey animals. And those prey animals would need enormous amounts of plant matter beneath them. It's not just inefficient. It's almost impossible to scale. Human civilizations have always depended on getting the most food from the least effort, the most calories for the least resources. Predators are the exact opposite of that. They are, by design, the most expensive meat you could possibly try to produce. And that alone is enough to explain a lot. But it doesn't explain everything, because even if you ignore the cost, there's something else happening inside predator meat that makes it even less appealing, something that builds quietly over time. Every environment contains trace amounts of toxins, heavy metals like mercury, industrial chemicals, pollutants that don't just disappear. Small organisms absorb tiny amounts of these substances. Then they get eaten, and everything inside them transfers upward. A slightly larger animal eats dozens of those smaller ones, collecting all of their toxins in the process. Then a predator eats dozens of those animals, and the concentration keeps increasing. It doesn't spread out, it stacks. By the time you reach the top of the food chain, you're looking at an animal that has spent its entire life accumulating everything beneath it. Not just nutrients, everything. This is why certain large fish are known to carry high levels of mercury, why some animals are considered unsafe to eat regularly. It's not because they're naturally harmful, it's because of where they sit in the chain. Predators don't just represent the top of the food pyramid, they represent the endpoint of accumulation. And that makes them risky in a way herbivores simply aren't. But even that isn't the full story, because the way an animal lives affects what its body becomes. Herbivores spend most of their time grazing, moving slowly, eating constantly. Their bodies are designed for steady energy intake and storage. Predators live differently. They chase, they stalk, they fight. They fail, and then they try again. Their lives are built around bursts of intense effort followed by long periods of waiting. That kind of lifestyle changes their muscles. Less stored energy, more tension, more stress-related chemicals circulating through their system. Their meat reflects that. It tends to be tougher, stronger in flavor, less forgiving when cooked. Not necessarily in a good way, in a way that reminds you that this wasn't an animal built for calm growth. It was built to hunt. And that difference shows up on the plate. Then there's something even less visible, but arguably more important: disease. Predators don't choose their food the way humans do. They often target the easiest prey, animals that are weak, injured, or sick. That's part of how ecosystems stay balanced. But it also means predators are constantly consuming animals that may already be carrying parasites or infections. And while cooking can eliminate many dangers, historically, that risk was much harder to control. Carnivorous animals have consistently been associated with higher chances of certain diseases being passed along through meat. Not always, but enough to matter. Because again, it's not just about the animal itself. It's about everything that animal has eaten, everything it has been exposed to, everything that has moved up the chain before reaching you. And all of that combines into something humans have learned, over time, to be cautious about. Now, this doesn't mean predator meat has never been eaten. It has. There are scattered examples throughout history of people consuming large carnivores. Bears, for example, have been eaten in some regions. In rare cases, other predators have been consumed too. But when you look closely at those situations, a pattern emerges. It's almost never common. It's almost never preferred. And it usually happens under specific conditions: limited availability of other food, survival situations, or cultural traditions that exist on a very small scale. Predator meat shows up as an exception, not a rule. It's something people turn to when they have to, not something they build systems around. And that distinction matters. Because human food systems aren't built on what's technically possible. They're built on what works consistently, what's efficient, what's safe, what's sustainable over long periods of time. Predators fail that test in almost every category. And over time, something else started to happen. Culture began to reinforce what biology had already suggested. Different societies, separated by distance and time, started drawing similar boundaries. Animals that hunted, animals with sharp claws and teeth, animals that lived at the top of the food chain. They were treated differently. Sometimes they were feared. Sometimes they were respected. Sometimes they were turned into symbols of strength, power, or even divinity. But they were rarely treated as everyday food. Because once an animal becomes more than just food, once it represents something larger, it naturally moves out of the category of things you casually consume. You don't build myths around cattle in the same way you do around wolves or lions. You don't tell stories about chickens the way you do about eagles. And that shift in perception matters more than it might seem. Because humans don't just eat based on nutrition. We eat based on meaning. And predators, in many cultures, stopped being seen as just meat. They became something else entirely. Something to avoid. Something to admire. Something to leave alone. So when you step back and look at the full picture, the pattern becomes clear. Predator meat isn't avoided for one single reason. It's avoided because everything about it points in the same direction. It requires more energy than it gives back. It carries more accumulated risk. It's harder to produce, harder to trust, and often less desirable to eat. And on top of all that, it exists in a space that humans have culturally chosen not to treat as food. So the absence of predators from our plates isn't strange. It's expected. It's what you'd predict if you understood how energy moves through ecosystems, how toxins accumulate, how bodies adapt to survival, and how humans build meaning around the world they live in. We didn't randomly decide not to eat predators. We kept encountering the same limitations over and over again, in different places, under different conditions. And eventually, without needing to say it out loud, we all reached the same conclusion: eat lower on the chain. Because the higher you go, the less there is to gain.